Hey guys, welcome to BOCAJS. Thank you guys for coming. We couldn't do this without you guys. Of course, we're going to hear from Cecil Phillips, one of my favorite presenters of all time, in a couple of minutes. But first, let's talk about the reason why we're here and the reason why we are able to eat and drink and be at the location. So before we talk about one particular recruiter, we're going to talk about our oldest recruiter, which, sponsor, which is Sendine Spaces. If you guys see, there's a bowl in the back. If you guys are working from home, thinking about working from home, or kind of tired of working from home, try our co-working space. It is spectacular. And by that, I mean literally, go ahead and put your business card there, and you're going to get a free week to try out the co-working space. You want to see what it's like. You want to see what it's like not to work in the office for a while. You have a kind of a place that can let you work remote. Try working in a place that you get all the benefits of work without any of the people bothering you except on Slack or text or whatever the case. So try it out, Sendine Spaces. At the end of the event, if I don't tell you guys, remind me, there is a free license to JetBrains for me to give away. So if you guys know WebStorm, PHP Storm, and Refactorer, Sharper, thank you, is available, and you guys get to choose any one of them, and I'll tell you a trick so you can keep it for life, okay? Because it's a year thing, but there's a trick between you and me. Don't tell anybody else, and make sure nobody records this. All right, this has been an amazing presentation, and it's going to be amazing because we are able to get for twice in a row one of my favorite recruiting firms around. They'll tell you all about it. Well, what? Here we go.
Hi guys, I hope you enjoyed the pizza. Of course. So you guys might have met me before. I've been to a few of these, but I'm Stephanie. This is Sierra, and we're with Gravity IT. So we're actually a local staffing firm. We've been around. We're fairly new. We've been around for 3 years now, and basically our bosses built a model off of the fact that all of the best IT talent tends to know other great IT talent. So they built our model off of a referral program. So basically, if you recommend someone to us and they end up being placed in that role, you actually receive a payout just for recommending that person to us. So there's 2 different ways that we do that. For permanent placements, you get 10% of the fee outright, and then for contract roles, you get 1% of what's billed monthly for the whole time of the contract. So honestly, you just make money from referring great talent. With that being said, we cover clients anywhere from South Miami to Juno Beach, and we actually have a bunch of roles available right now. So we would love to meet you guys. We would love to tell you more about them, and we would love to consider you for them. So feel free to come, meet us. We would love to meet you. So thank you so much, and thank you.
Yeah, I guess really look into what's there. I've been promised by other recruiters iPads and $200, and then when I do find somebody a job, it's like, yeah, but we're not actually allowed to give you anything, and I'm like, great. Well, they actually are. So you won't find another recruiter like them. So I find it fascinating. Next month, November 16th, we're going to have a bunch of different experts. They're going to be up here. There's not going to be a presentation. You'll be able to ask your questions. We're going to send you guys a short survey. Me and Jeremy, are going to come here. So I'm Tero. This is Jeremy Lawson. We run BOCAJS. We also run, I help with the Palm Beach Tech. Palm Beach, JavaScript, up in Palm Beach. So definitely sign up for that event. We'll send you guys an email with that. We're also, they keep on letting me know, there's a lot of recruiters that come over with, like, they want to recruit, yay, but don't have jobs. Great. They do. I see. So talk to them about it. If you guys are looking for a job, they actually have been talking to me about letting you guys know about that. Next month, like I said, meet the experts. We're going to send you guys a questionnaire, and please fill it in. Let us know, even if you're not coming, what questions you'd like to be answered. There's going to be front-end developers, back-end developers that have been at least 20 years in the business. There's people that have sold recruiting firms. You can ask questions. You're going to get sort of an insight into something maybe you might not from a recruiter. A bunch of different people in different industries, databases, front-end, graphics. So check them out. I always remind you guys, do me a favor, if you guys appreciate what I'm doing here for you guys and presentations are, go to videos.bocajs.org and sign up. Do me a favor and subscribe. reach 100 and then have youtube.com/BOCAJS. And then you guys will be able to see all the events. What I do is I record all the events, not only for BOCAJS, but a bunch of different other ones. So check them out. BOCAJS.org if you have any questions, and we are on Twitter. But you are not here to see and talk to me. You are here to be one of the best, should I step away? Or one of the best presenters I know, the presenter that I've been watching for the last 10, 15 years. And it's an honor to finally get him in BOCAJS. This is a great group because of you guys, but you're going to see a great presentation because of that man, Cecil Phillips. One last thing, there is a hint. He's going to be presenting something. Don't listen to anything, because then you will know how I do the prizes at the end of the day. I actually use this technology.
All right, give me 1 second. Let me just steal this HDMI cable real quick. Click, click, click. And let's close that. All right, great. Hi, everybody. My name is Cecil Phillip, and I'm going to be talking to you today about building real-time applications with ASP.NET SignalR. If you're wondering what's in the cup, I promise there's no alcohol in it. It's only soda. So a little bit about me before I get started. So I'm a cloud developer advocate at Microsoft. So essentially that means I get to go around to talk to a lot of companies and students and startups about, how can they help them bring their applications into the cloud. I spend a lot of time doing education. So I speak to, again, a lot of students. I do a lot of workshops. I write a lot of resources, and I do a lot of videos and stuff like that. So essentially, that's pretty much what I do for the most part. Now, my focus over the past couple of years or so has primarily been on .NET. So I know this is a JavaScript meetup. I promise I'm not here to convert you to .NET. I promise I'm not trying to get anybody to jump over to Azure. I'm not selling anything. But I can tell you that throughout my experience, I've worked with a lot of companies that their stack is usually never just one language, right? Like people have tons of different things inside of their companies. Like there was a while ago that I used to work for a stock trading firm, and they had Ruby and PHP and RabbitMQ and .NET and pretty much like every language that you could imagine, right? Like all talking together behind the servers, right? So again, just to show you, like we could all figure out a way that we can make everything work together. So really quickly, what we're going to talk about today. So I want to talk to you about building real-time applications. So we're going to give you a really quick overview. We're going to talk about some of the use cases. We're going to talk about transports. And obviously, too, we're going to talk about ASP.NET Core SignalR as the implementation mechanism. But mostly, I want you to pay attention to the patterns so you can really understand like how some of the stuff works. And obviously, we're going to look at some of the performance metrics and some charts that I have. And then also, we're going to talk about scaling and what happens when you need to scale out to thousands, even millions of users with your real-time connections. All right. So really quickly, let's just talk about some of the use cases of building real-time applications. So I swear to you, every time I go out somewhere and somebody talks about, like they show me a chat application. Well, there's a lot more that you can do with real-time solutions and chat applications, right? Like we could build things like, gaming is a big thing, and social media. If you have anything that, involved with real-time dashboards, real-time charts, or anything that's responding to data very quickly, like this is a good use case for using real-time applications. Just a quick show of hands. How many of you have an experience building real-time solutions or anything else? Yeah. What do you guys use for the most part? I did, man. Socket.io for the most part. Anybody use anything like Pusher or PubNub or anything like that? .NET remoting, that counts too. Anybody else? You use SignalR too? Are you using SignalR Core or just the old one? Okay. So I'm sorry? 2 years ago? Okay. So I'm going to talk about some of the differences between current SignalR and the previous version of SignalR 2. So that might be useful for you as well. So let's start about talking about native transports. And what I mean about native transports is like how do we, what do we actually call real time, right? Like what do we perceive to be like a real-time connection when we're building applications? Now I remember when I first started and jQuery was like the thing, right? Like we were trying to determine, should we use prototype or should we use jQuery or should we use MooTools or, you know what I mean? Like we were having that type of discussion. And Ajax was the thing, right? And Ajax made us feel like, hey, I didn't have to refresh this page, but the page was very responsive and it kind of looked like we were in real time, right? Like things were just happening and changing inside of the browser without too much of interaction from our part. You know what I mean? And so that's one of the things that kind of started this whole thing about, how can we enrich the experience of the user by creating more richer applications in the front. So one of the things that we do when we want to try and get updated data is we do this thing called polling. Right? Now everybody pretty much understands what polling is. It's pretty much like the base level of trying to get that real-time experience. Right? Like, so I have a WebSocket open, or I have a web API or something, some client open, and I'm just going to keep asking for updates over and over and over again. So I'm like, are you ready? 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 Over and over and over again until I get some updates. And even after I get the update, I'm still asking, are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Right? And what do you think some of the problems of doing something like that are? It's inefficient, right? To be constantly asking all the time, are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? When you think about the amount of connections that you have to open up, it's just gonna be exponential, right? And actually, I want to show you an example. And apologize, like my clicker's not working, so I'm going to spend most of my time over here. I want to show you this example I have of polling. Ooh, sorry. Now, let me know if you can see this. So I wrote this application, and I'm actually using Vue.js. Is anybody familiar with Vue.js? Okay, great. So this application, this demo I'm about to show is using Vue.js. I have TypeScript, and I'm using some Webpack in the background just to do custom compile. You want to use that instead? Okay. Right, so I'm using TypeScript, Webpack, and Vue.js, right? That's not important, but just in case you're wondering why I have so many files in here. So if I take a look inside of my long polling.ts, so here I have a function called poll. So essentially, when we take a look at it, is that big enough for everybody in the back, by the way? Can you guys see that, or should I make that a little bit bigger? 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 Better? Yeah? Great. All right. So essentially what my polling function is doing, if you take a look at line 12, right, so whenever this function starts, I'm going to call set interval. Right? And you guys know what set interval does, right? It's going to kick off some function. It's going to run that repeatedly in some timer. So every second, I have a set interval that's going to fire. It's going to call this data poll function. Right? And essentially, this is just a web API that I have running inside of my app. And all it does is it just returns data. Now, that particular data has two properties on it. Is it done? Right? So all that's going to happen is that I'm just going to keep calling this function until it says that it's done. Right? So again, you can imagine I'm polling, right? I'm asking for information. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Right? Now let's take a look and see what it looks like in the browser when I actually run this. Ooh. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop up my terminal real quick. And again, I'm running Webpack on here. So really quickly, I am going to, all right, clear. So I'm going to do an npm run builds dev, right? So all this is going to do is it's just going to compile all this Webpacky Vue stuff, and it's going to put that in the bundle for me. And now I'm actually going to run this application. So I'm going to hit start debug. And in a second or so, it should pop up the browser, and then we should see our demo application. Tick, 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 tick. Great. Now, oh, that's not right. What does that look like? That? There we go. That looks better. Now, what we have on the left side is on the right side here, I have two buttons. So I have poll and long poll, and I'm going to tell you what the difference is in a second. But I'm going to hit this poll button, and again, it's going to hit my API, but over and then, it's just going to keep running, right? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Right, so I'm going to hit poll, and now it's just going to keep populating this list with data, right? And it's going to keep going, it's going to keep going, it's going to keep going. What you might not see is that it doesn't populate data every time. Sometimes it misses a second or two, because that API is a little flaky, right? Like sometimes the API times out, sometimes it doesn't return any data, and I have to retry it. So that's why I keep asking, is it ready, is it ready, is it ready? And at some point in time, I'm just going to stop, because it's going to say, hey, I'm done. I don't have any more information to give you. Now, the thing to notice about this is that if we take a look here, look at all of these requests that I'm making. Right? I'm just making requests over and over and over again. Right? And sometimes I get data, and sometimes I don't. Right? So again, like this is extremely inefficient. This is not what we want to be doing, right? Like we're wasting resources on the browser to be constantly asking for stuff. Right. Now I'm going to stop this. Now, another option we have is something called long polling, right? And I'll show you what that long polling code does in a second. Now, my long polling code, let me move some of this stuff around really quickly. So my long polling code is a little bit different. Now, the only difference between me polling and long polling is that on the server, I'm going to hold on to that connection versus like just calling it and letting it go, right? So I might hold on to that connection for like 12 seconds or 10 seconds versus just hitting it constantly, versus me just hammering it every time. So my browser should be still running, right? I'm going to refresh this page really quickly. And now when I do this long pull, notice the difference in that instead of it saying, I want to move this over a little bit so you guys can see this. Great. Versus it hitting all the time, you notice for a brief second it's going to say pending. Right? And so when it's pending, it means that it's just holding on to that connection. Right? It's not going to every second or so keep hitting that machine. Right? And it goes by really quickly. So I'm going to come over here so you can see it. Let me clear this. I'll move this up. How do I move this? Come on. Move for me. Come on. How do you move this thing? To the next one? Ah, okay, there we go. And now it doesn't want to move. Are you serious? All right, anyway, I want you to believe me when I say, essentially what's happening, I'm just going to hit this. But notice it just says pending. And notice how long it's saying pending for, and it's just holding on to that connection. And then after a while it says 200, right? So if you're used to building web APIs, you know 200 means okay, it means success, right? So I had to hold on to that connection for a little while until I get my successful response back. Now if you compare this to the other one, which one do you think is more efficient? I hope you're going to say the second one. Right, the second one's more efficient, right? Because again, in the first example, for us to achieve the perception of real time for the client, we have to be constantly hitting things all the time. Now I could just say, oh, okay, well, I'm going to send it, and I'm going to let the server hold on to that connection for a little bit, and then I can get my response back. Now, even though that works, that's also not the most efficient way for us to do things, right? Because now what happens when errors happen, right? Or what happens when I have a lot of clients? Or what happens if I need to maintain multiples of these connections, right? Now, if you're familiar with how browsers work, we have a limited amount of connection that we can make per browser, right? Some browsers are 8, some browsers are 6, depending on the version and whether you're using IE or Firefox or whatever, right? Like we all have different limits that we could hit. So you don't want to hold on to all of your connections in the browser, right? So we still need to have a more efficient way to deal with some of these things. All right, so let's head back to the slides really quickly. Slide. Okay, so we have a few other options, and I'm not gonna dive super deep into some of these. So another option we have is something called server-sent events, right? And so with server-sent events, we got a couple different options from the perspective of now we can start sending different types of data, but also too, we can have a dedicated channel from the server to the clients, and the server could just start pushing data to the client whenever it's ready, right? So the client essentially establishes that connection, right? It establishes what's called, I think it's, oh, sorry, I didn't see that. Why are you looking at that? Let me see if I can fix that real quick. How can I switch this? Switch. There you go. And you guys didn't even tell me anything. Anyway, so with service send, it is what it sounds like, right? The server is going to be sending events over to the client. The thing with that, though, now is that the browser is going to create this thing called an event source, right? And I can listen to one particular endpoint, and now I can start getting events back from that machine. Now I'm going to show you really quickly what this looks like in code. I have this as well. Don't worry about it. So I'm going to show you a look really quickly at what this looks like. You want to move it?
You have the right place. Sorry. I don't mean to interrupt, guys. Yeah, I have the same point. This continues. I'll switch to the mic and I'll hold on.
Okay, no worries. Just let me know what you want me to do.
No, you go. Sorry. Please.
No worries. So when we create an event source in the browser, this is what it looks like. Now already you can see this is exponentially less code than what we wrote before, right? There's maybe like, technically I can make this 2 lines of code if I wanted to, right? Like if we chop out line 14, because I really don't need that, and I could get rid of the curly braces and make this a lambda. This is essentially 2 lines of code for us to start reacting to events that get pushed from the server, right? And now notice that we create that event source connection, and then I just specify exactly where it's coming from. Now, using this type, I have a lot of different options, right? Oops, caps lock. So I can say something like event source dot on. So I can say I want to give a handler when an error happens, when a message comes in, or when the connection first opens, right? So we have different ways that we could start to interact with these types of things, right? And I can have one or many of these things kind of happen on the side. And so that's great too. I'm not going to show you this because you guys believe me that this is going to work. Back to the slides really quickly. And I'm just kind of glancing over these things really quick because, again, I want to get to the meat of what we came to talk about. Now, that's great too, but then more recently we have a more robust framework called WebSockets. The thing with WebSockets that's a little bit better than service-end events is that WebSockets is full duplex, which essentially means that we could go back and forth, right? Service-end events only go one way, right? It's a one-way push to single client, right? With WebSockets, we can go back and forth, right? So again, we have a full pipe that goes on both sides. Also, too, we can send binary data, right? So with the others, we can only send text information. So if you're sending JSON, that's fine. If you're just sending strings and things of that nature, that's fine. With WebSockets now, we could send bytes, and we could compress our data a little bit more to send more interesting formats, right? So if you want to do gzip or anything like that. On top of that, it doesn't have the same connection limits that we usually have with web browsers. So again, a browser might have like 6 to 8 concurrent connections that it can have at a time. With a WebSocket, I think we can have up to 50, which, as you can tell already, is like a huge difference from what we could do with typical connections. Now, so let's talk about SignalR now. So the reasons why I want to talk about all of those things is because what you'll notice is that different browsers have different levels of support for all of these different transports, right? So, different browsers have different levels of support for, I remember service-end events for a while was only supported by Firefox until, eventually like some other browsers started to support it, right? And then, now most modern browsers would have support for WebSockets. But now what we get with ASP.NET SignalR is essentially we get an abstraction over all of them. Right? Which is great because if you have users that have different types of browsers, I don't have to worry about what version of Firefox are you using, or you turn off auto update off of Chrome, so I don't know what version of Chrome you happen to be running on, right? And so whether you support WebSockets or service-end events, or if we have to go all the way back down to long polling, we'll be able to get the same real programming model using the SignalR core library. Right. So let's talk really quickly about SignalR. Right. So SignalR is based off of this construct called a hub. Right. So a hub, and I'll show you what it looks like in a second. On the server side, we create this thing called a hub that has methods. Right. And these are methods that once you call them, they're going to invoke that connection, and it's going to make calls to things that happen on the client. Right. And again, like I said before, it supports these different types of transports. Right. So WebSockets, service-end events, long polling. In the last version of SignalR, it supported this thing called Forever Frame. So Forever Frame was this weird thing where it opened the iframe. There were some weird flash-y kind of things going on. We don't support that anymore because we realized it was a bad idea. But again, for most browsers, like most of your browsers will support one of these things, right? So these are the ones that we support today. On top of that too, like we support groups. We can push to individual users, and we can also broadcast to multiple users. So again, like whatever is happening on the background, right? Like you get the same programming model, and now we get all this additional functionality, right? Because again, we can push to groups, individuals, broadcasts, and you can create your own sections or whatever it is that you need. Another thing that's interesting is that today, so the SignalR client today is written in TypeScript. So it's written in TypeScript, which means it works in JavaScript as well. And then we also have .NET and Java clients that are available today. Actually, the Java client is in preview, right? And then I think later on we're going to have an iOS client too. So if you're building like mobile applications with Android or iOS, you'll be able to make use of those clients as well. And the last piece I'm really excited about is streaming. So the streaming support is pretty interesting, and I won't say too much more about that. You're gonna see what that looks like in a second. Now, let's talk a little bit about the differences between the old version and the new version. So today, one of the things that they decided to take out was the dependency on jQuery. Now, for some reason, people seem to have like this love-hate relationship with jQuery. I think jQuery is great. I've never had a problem with jQuery, but some people don't want that extra weight and that extra dependency inside of their code, and that's fine. So it's optional. If you want to use it, you could bring it in, but you don't have to bring it in, right? So that dependency is removed. We also had a feature that was allowed you to, like, if you had a client that was disconnected, we'd reconnect you, and then we'd replay all of the messages that you missed. So let's say you were having you're in a chat group, right? And you got disconnected from the chat for 10 seconds. And I don't know, maybe your friends are really chatty, right? And you just missed like 100 messages. When you reconnected, we replay all those messages for you. So that essentially you really wouldn't miss anything. The problem with that is that on the server side, you can imagine there's a lot of memory that's gonna get used to store that information. Because we had to buffer it somewhere, right? And so we had a lot of issues with memory spikes, a lot of issues with again, running out of memory. So again, we took that feature out, that's not there anymore. And now in this current version too, we also require you to have sticky sessions. So sticky sessions essentially means that you have to go back to the same server that you came from, pretty much. Before we were doing like this ping pong, whatever server you land on type situation. That also too was a source of a lot of problems. So again, we got rid of that too. Now, before I actually show you some SignalR code, I want to show you some of the performance charts. Can you guys see the bottom of that? Can you? Can you see the bottom of that slide? Yes? Great. All right. So there are three things that I'm showing here. So these are the three different transports that we support. So the first section is showing WebSockets. The middle section is showing server-side events. And the last section is showing long polling. So as you can imagine, the further left side has better performance than the right side. Right? So if you look here, we have 10, 100, 500, and 1,000. So those are how many concurrent connections we're having at a particular point in time. And if you could look at the colors, you could see, obviously as we have more connections, the performance gets worse. But again, long polling is easily like the least performant of all of them. Now, what I want to do really quickly is I want to show you one of our live dashboards that we have. So I am going to go to this website called ASP.NET Benchmarks. So this is a public dashboard that we have. This is not like behind some corporate firewall or anything like that. It's very much in the open and anybody can take a look at it. And I'm going to show you the current benchmarks of SignalR that we're running. So if we take a look here, so now we can see things like requests per second, the average latency, and then we can also see what it's like for the different protocols we support. So when I say different protocols, so SignalR again is just kind of piggybacking off of server-side events and WebSockets and some of these other things. But there's actually a protocol that it speaks back and forth, right? So the client and the server have to negotiate so they know, okay, well, this is what the client supports, so this is what I'm going to use to connect to you. Right? There's like a handshake that has to happen. And so when that happens, we not only say, well, this is the transport we're going to use, but we can also say, well, this is the protocol that we're going to support. So today we only support protocols. There's message pack and there's JSON. Is everybody familiar with message pack? Okay, so we had XML, nobody does XML anymore. We have JSON. So message pack is just another way of transferring data, right? It's a format that we can compact data in a very small packet. The reason that it's not used as much is because it's not human readable. So like you could look at JSON, you could look at XML, you could pretty much eyeball, you could see what's going on. With message pack, it's built for compactness. So because of that, again, it's not very readable. So a lot of people don't use it. It's a little bit harder to debug. But you get way more performance out of it because you're sending less bytes over the wire. So if you take a look at that black line on the left side, right? So this one is showing requests per second. So here, our message pack transport is well over 100,000 requests per second with message pack, versus with JSON, you see it's almost half that, right? And again, that has nothing to do with WebSockets or anything. That's just us changing the format of the information that we're sending back and forth. Like we've almost doubled it if we decided to use message pack, right? And as you'll see in a second, like you can pick and choose like which one you want to turn on and turn off. You could also see we have the maximum CPU usage. So you can see message pack also, like it takes a lot less CPU. Well, because it's a lot less to parse, right? Because then there's a lot less information going back and forth over the wire. Right. All right, I'm going to zoom out of this. So again, this is just a public dashboard. You guys can take a look at it anytime you want. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over and we're going to take a look at a demo of SignalR. Let's see what this looks like. So I'm going to stop this one. Demo. Right, so just like the other one, this one is built with, with Vue and TypeScript and some of these other things. Now, I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to show you how exactly you get started. I'm going to start with the client first. So here what I'm doing is I'm tapping into a Vue.js lifecycle hook. Right, so essentially whenever my application starts, right, whenever it gets created, I'm going to create this thing called a hub connection, right? And so I use the SignalR type hub connection builder, and I say configure logging, I configure the transports, I pretty much set it up, right? I'm using like a builder pattern. And now with this connection, very similar to how we did with server-side events, I can now just put callbacks onto these different events that happen. So notice I could say, hey, whenever you get a message on type send, this is the method I want you to run, right? And very similar too, I could do something like, this dot connection dot, on close, or, if there's an error, like what do I want to do when errors happen, right? I could do logging and, all the things that you would expect, to do in a framework like this, like you could do that. So essentially all that's happening here right now is every time I get a call back from the server, every time the server says, hey, I'm going to send you some information, right? I'm just going to put in, I'm using like a Redux store, Vuex, if you guys are familiar with Redux. I'm using like a Redux style pattern, and essentially I'm just adding things to a list, right? Right, let's take a look really quickly and see what the server side looks like. So from an ASP.NET perspective, like we have this thing called startup.cs. And essentially that's how our server starts up. And we could let our servers know, well, this is what I want to do on the server side, right? And it's very much we call it what do you call it? Like whatever you put in is what you get kind of thing. Like, so if you don't put something in there, you don't have it type situation. So here what I'm saying is I want to add MVC and I want to add SignalR. I'm also saying I want to add the message pack protocol, right? So again, I'm just composing the things that my server can support. And then if I go down a little bit further, here what I'm doing now is I'm setting up the routes for my SignalR hub. So if you take a look at line 36, what you see that I'm doing is I'm mapping a SignalR hub. So if you remember what I said, a hub is essentially the piece in the server side that we're using to make these connections back and forth. So I have an application hub, and I'm expecting my client to map to it on this endpoint. If I take a peek at that definition of my hub, essentially the only thing that's important is that anytime I call send, I'm going to say clients.all that send. So essentially I'm doing a broadcast. I'm taking all of my clients that have connected to me right now, and I'm just sending everybody the same message. Right? And so essentially those are all the pieces you need. Right, so this is all the server-side code I need to get started, and then you already saw what it's looked like on the client. So let's go ahead and run this really quick. Actually, let me make sure that I Webpack built this thing. Nope, that's not what I want. npm builds run builds dev. All right, so again, I'm going to have Webpack come in. It's going to build all my Vue and stuff like that. And that should be ready. I can get rid of this. And now I'm going to go ahead and debug this application. Now, while this is booting up, I just want to set expectations really quickly. This is not as pretty as the last one. It's not a very pretty application at all. Like, my design skills are not that good. All right, this says, what does this say? That's a lot of stuff. What does it say? I swear to God, I ran this like 10 seconds ago. Let's try this again. Boom, let's kill this. Let's do a .NET build. All right, that looks fine. All right, and let's debug it. All right, let's go. Exception. All right, give me a second. I'm gonna see what's happening here. Debug console. Do I have any paired programs here? Anybody want to tell me what's going on with this thing? Okay. Step 1. Acceptly manifest system.io. Okay. Let's do this. I am going to. It's always fun when your demos break in front of everybody.
Better than system.oh.
Is better than what?
System.oh.
Now I am going to. That's not what I wanted to do. So sometimes this thing happens that I have to come in here and start deleting stuff. I'm going to delete this folder, and I'm going to delete this folder. There we go. All right, let's pop up my terminal again real quick. Let's kill that. Let's do a .NET restore. .NET build. Build world like last time, okay. .NET on a Mac. No? Look at some. All right, give me 2 seconds, because this cannot be happening right now. Oh yeah?
Cecil, stop me in a moment, okay?
No, keep going.
And so the website broke, and I was like, maybe people are interested in seeing the debug, right? Because there's something about watching a senior guy, not that he's older than me, but he's more and more intelligent than me, debugging all that. But it was me. I was debugging, I was clumsy doing that. And 2 developers walk up and says, you gotta come and help us. And I got a big fat contract because of pulling and debugging a lot. That's what Cecil's trying to do with you. Which one of you guys is the one that's trying to find out and saying, this guy knows what to do, I need to hire him?
Both succeeded.
I also know maybe half the things he knows.
So it's not reading an assembly. I don't know what assembly it's trying to get. Lazy, something. All right, let's try this. Clear that.
Of course. Sorry guys, the sound. We should have a wonderful sound or a bad sound. Whoever's playing the violin, please stop.
That's weird. I swear to God, I ran this just before I got here today. I'm sorry, what? The version looks correct. Let me look at my, let me stop this, and I can take a look at my CS proj, maybe? Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. All right, let's try this. I'm going to .NET, new, global, and now it should be in here. Where did I put this? Boom, 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 boom. Okay, that looks great. CD demo 6. Store. Line 17. What's on line 17? No, I can't take that one out. Reflections. A file load exception. Cannot load file. Version. I shouldn't have to. That's strange. I hope this is as fascinating for you as it is for me, because I'm trying to understand what is happening here. Let's do this. What's that? I should have used Visual Studio, right? I really should use Visual Studio. Let's do this. Let's run this now. Same thing, same exception. I have no idea what's going on here. So, I'm sorry, what? All right, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to pretend that this works. And we're going to walk through the code anyway, right? So I can show you exactly what the looks like. And I'll figure out what's going on here at some other. You want me to turn it off?
Yes.
Oh, wow. I feel like important.
Yes.
All right, so essentially what's going to happen here, I had a little window, right, and a little text box. Again, we're not missing much. And so as I put messages in it, it'll essentially be popping up in two browsers, right? Now, another thing that we could do, in addition to just sending these messages from the client, I could also invoke them via a REST API. So let's say I have a client that might not necessarily be speaking SignalR speak, I can invoke it from a REST API as well. So if I take a look at if I go over and take a look at my controller, so essentially I have a web API controller, right? And now my web API controller gets something called a hub context. So all the hub context does is allows me to access those real-time connections, but outside of the context of my hub, right? So for instance here, if I posted a message, again, I get access to that context, so I could say clients.all.send. And now I'm just sending these broadcast messages throughout everybody that's connected to this particular server at the time.
So like a channel, or what's the context?
So the context essentially is just that connection to that hub, right? So if you guys remember, I showed you a hub a little while ago. So what my hub looks like is this, right? So again, very simple, like it's literally like, you know, just one function that all it does is that it just starts to send these messages. So if I wanted to invoke my hub from outside of, from the outside, you know, but not necessarily from the client, I could just call clients.all here, and it'll just do the same thing, right? It's acting like it's the hub itself. So we saw how we could send things, just regular broadcasts. I want to show you another piece that I find to be a little interesting. So one thing that we could do is we could add streaming. And we're not going to see it run, but, you know, I'll show you what it does. So with streaming, if you've ever used anything like RxJS, for instance, so RxJS is known to be a JavaScript streaming framework, right? So one of the things that we've done with SignalR is that essentially it implements that same observable interface, right? So that means that I could take my RxJS filters, my RxJS observables, and I could go back and forth and turn them into SignalR, SignalR streaming pieces. So one of the things that I had to do is I created this thing called a hub adapter, right? And so if you take a look at my adapter, you can see here it's not a lot of code, but I think TypeScript kind of makes it a little bit easier for me to kind of figure out what's going on inside of here. How many of you all are familiar with RxJS, by the way, before I go on? You familiar with Rx? Yeah, you are? Nobody else? All right, so with RxJS, essentially, instead of thinking about events as like this one-time occurrence, like we think about events as a continuous stream of things. So you think about like a mouse move, for instance. Like as you move your mouse, like every time it moves like a pixel, right, essentially you're getting like another point. Right, so instead of invoking a method over and over again, essentially we get like a list, or we get a stream of events that fire. So now we could do things like we could filter the events and so on. So anyway, so going back to that point, now we have this type in here called iStreamResult, and essentially it has the same interface as Rx, right? So I could subscribe to things, and I can create my onNext, my onError, my onCompletes. So if we take a look really quickly, let me go back to my adapter. Oops. If we go back to my adapter, again, so what I'm doing here is I'm creating this thing called a subject, right? So a subject essentially is like a message bus. It's probably not a message bus, but it's kind of like a message bus. So I can send messages in and it comes out the other way, right? So I'm using this message bus and I'm subscribing to it using my, my SignalR stream, and then I'm just returning it as an observable, right? So again, what I get from that now is the ability to use these different RxJS filters. So again, I have map, I have filter, I have switch map, I have tap, I have do, I have like all of those different operators that are not built into SignalR, are not built into the framework. I just got them now for free, creating that little adapter. And so if you take a look at our code a little bit further here at the bottom, right? So you can see here that I have this method here called stream, right? And then after I call adapt to it, I could start using these things. As I'm counting down, I could start to add filters and some of these different types of things. So now when my list starts to count down, essentially all that's happening here is that I'm going to start counting down by even numbers, right? Because now I'm starting to filter that information. But you could think about, let's say you're creating like a stock ticker, right? I had a stock ticker, but you only wanted to get stocks that have a certain symbol, or you only want to get them when the price is going up. I can essentially just create a filter here, and I can have in the background SignalR generating all of these real-time events, letting me know, okay, well, the price is going up, the price is going down. But maybe my app only cares to filter out the ones that are going up, and I could easily do that using my RxJS filters that are here. So again, so that's how easily that you could add RxJS to this. So let's go back to the slides very quickly. All right, so now let's talk about scale out a little bit. So So the thing with SignalR today is when you connect to a server, you're connecting to an individual server. And now when we talk about scaling out, you might want to have multiple web servers. You might have a web forum. You might have 2 or 3 or dozens of these things. Now, the problem is if you have a user on one server and users on other servers, then they can't talk to each other because they're stuck to that server, right? Because again, we're talking about we need to have sticky sessions. Like that real-time connection needs to belong to a server. So we need to be able to find a way that we could scale out our server farm and still allow people to talk to, each other. And so that's essentially where the backplane comes into play. So with the backplane, essentially what happens is that those connections or those messages go into the backplane, and this could be like a message bus, it could be AMQP, it could be Redis, it could be any of those types of transports. But now SignalR will use that backplane to broadcast these messages, not just to the clients connected to that one server, but to all of the different servers. So today we have a couple of different backplanes that we support. Right? We support using Redis today out of the box. We support the Azure SignalR service that I'm going to show you in a little bit. And then you can build your own if you wanted to as well. One of the good things about SignalR being one cross-platform and open source is that the protocol is very well documented. So you can go into GitHub and you could, not just read the code, but you could actually read the spec. And it'll let you know like what's the messages that it's expecting to go back and forth. It'll let you know the responses and how to create different protocols and clients and servers. So if you wanted to, you could create your own SignalR client, or you could create your own SignalR service if you wanted to. So let's talk really quickly about the SignalR servers. So I was at Ignite last week. Ignite is a Microsoft conference. They have, IT folks and developers and, different types of folks. And we announced this going GA last week. So it was in preview for a couple of months, and now it's generally available. So essentially what this service does is, instead of you having to manage your own scale out, right? Because now that means that, hey, I'm going to have to set up my own servers or my own VMs, and I got to set up Redis, and I got to, set up sharding and do all these types of things to get that to work. Essentially, all you have to do is just turn on our service, add a connection string, and it'll just start working. Right? And essentially, that's all you really have to do. It's essentially like 2 lines of code, and you can go from scaling out on one machine to scaling out to as many as you'd like. Right? So again, just like before, this was based on ASP.NET Core SignalR itself. So that's essentially what's running in the cloud. And then again, it's very easy for us to scale out some of this traffic. So if we take a look and see what this actually does for us. So your web application, you're going to have that hub that we spoke about, and it's going to talk to the service that's living in the cloud. And now your client browser, instead of making connections to the hub that's inside of your application, is going to make a connection over into the cloud. Right? So what this allows us to do is you can not only just scale out your web application, but you could scale out your real-time connections as well. So there might be a situation where, again, let's talk about a chat application or that's very heavy in real-time connectivity. You might want to scale out your service before you scale out your web farm, right? Or it might be vice versa, right? Maybe you want to scale out your web farm, but you don't really necessarily need to scale out the things that's doing notifications and some of these types of things for you, right? Flexibility of kind of picking and choosing what side of the world you kind of want to be on. So I want to show you SignalR service really quickly, even though my demo thing doesn't work. So essentially what we're going to do is, and I'm going to make this bigger too. Yeah, I created a service instance called BOCAJS. And honestly, literally all I did was I went to create, and I just clicked on create new SignalR service. And then what you'll do here is you'll come down to the section that says keys. Can you stay? Stay, don't move. All right, thank you. All right, so you come down to the section that says keys, and all you need to do is find a connection string, right? So here's my connection string. I see some of you all with cameras. Do not take a picture of my stuff, because I'm going to get rid of this as soon as we leave here today. But essentially, you take this connection string and you put it inside of your application. And so now once that's in there, I'm going to head over to my app that doesn't work. So essentially what I can do while we're in here is I can go over to the hub, or I'm sorry, I could go to my startup class. And instead of saying just add SignalR, I can say that add Azure SignalR, right? And that's all I have to do. Right? I'm lying, that's not all I have to do.
Yeah.
I'm going to use Azure SignalR. Great, now that's all I have to do, right? So once we've done that, and then obviously I have to put in my connection string into the application. I just have to put it in settings somewhere. But now, after I've made those 2 changes in my code, now my scale is going to be happening inside of the cloud versus happening, me being stuck in a single machine here. Yeah. Again, I would show it to you, but, the demo gods weren't nice to me today.
Could you set it up on both the back end and the front end?
Yeah. Well, so on the front end, you don't have to change any of your JavaScript code, right? Like once you change it in the back, like your client just automatically knows about it. So so anything that I've written in Vue or Angular or whatever it is that folks are using, you don't have to change any of that code at all. Like it just knows what to connect to. Yeah, it just knows. It'll just know what it needs to connect to. All right, so let's talk about some things that are coming later. So I mentioned earlier that we don't have client reconnect. We took that out because of performance issues. So we're going to add that back. We're going to add some, better features around connection resiliency. We want to add user persistence. So you could say, Amir connected, he disconnected, he went away for 10 minutes and came back. We want to identify users a little bit better. We're going to have more clients coming. We're going to have C++ and iOS. And also, what I think is really interesting, we want to have more low-level transports. So today, SignalR is very much of an ASP.NET web thing, right? And one of the things that we're exploring is the ability to away from and just have it run on any connection, which I think is interesting. So imagine if we had like a generic connectivity framework per se, right? So I don't want to be running on the web anymore. I just want to run on raw sockets, right? So now I could get rid of that web dependency, and I can run it on AMQP, or I could run it on, you know, MQQT, which a lot of folks are running for IoT type scenarios. You know, I don't need a web server anymore. I could just run it in a console app, and it could just work, right? So that's not ready yet. That's one of the things that we're exploring. We're kind of playing around with, but that's going to be coming soon. And I think that's about it. I'm very sorry the demo didn't work. I'm going to go home and try and figure that out for you. But what I'll put it on GitHub. I'll put it in the show notes for the group, and you guys can check it out a little bit later, and hopefully it'll work. But thank you so much for coming out. I appreciate it. Hope you guys have a good night. Oh yeah, if you guys have any questions at all? No questions? No?
Hold on. You and I, this thing, we got to count to 20, you know. Can you turn on that one on? Turn on the, it's off. Turn on. Yes, you had questions? Who had questions? All right. You start?
The SignalR service, can you clarify on that? Because it goes to a different endpoint, you're saying. So does it go through your application, and the application goes to the different service?
I'm sorry, I was talking to myself. What did you say?
Yeah, the SignalR service. Can you explain how that works again? Because I didn't,
Sure.
I wasn't clear on how the message got to that service.
Sure. So without the service, without the SignalR service, essentially what happens is that your clients, and your client could be .NET, JavaScript, whatever, right? Your client is going to connect to your hub, and then there's going to be a negotiation, right? Negotiation is going to say, I support WebSockets or server-side events, or I don't support any of them. I'm going to do long polling. It's going to say, this is the format I'm using, so I'm using JSON or message pack or whatever new thing you decide to plug in. But it also gives it an endpoint to call, right? So if you remember, when I showed you my hub, I had like a /app, right? So that's the endpoint it's going to call, right? So the client knows what exactly it is I'm going to connect to. So when we add the SignalR service, instead of it giving me a local endpoint, it's going to give me an endpoint that's in the cloud. So now when you start to send messages, and it's going to be the same routes, the same methods that you have in your hub, just that they're kind of proxied, right? They're going to be proxied through the cloud instead. So now what happens is that we can scale that piece independently of your website. Yeah. Another question?
Yeah, actually I had two.
Sure.
One was, how do you, is it easy to switch to message pack? If you're using JSON, can you just type .message pack, or I mean, does something just happen, or do you have to compress that somehow?
So again, just like JSON, right? Like, so if you're a .NET person, like, you know, we have JSON.NET, right? On the JavaScript side, there's a message pack 5 npm package that'll do that on the client side as well. So again, it works on the client and the server, and all it is just you calling, you know, serialize essentially, and then passing it back and forth. Now, if you're talking about how to support inside of the server, is you see, all I had to do to support it inside of the server was say, add message pack protocol. And this is just a package that I bring in, and just adds that support for me. And now when I go over into the clients, that's not what I want to do. When I go over into my clients, I commented this out a little bit earlier, but essentially, now I'm saying my client knows how to talk message pack. Right, so you have to say, this is what the client supports, and this is what the server supports. Because the server can support more stuff than the client does, or vice versa. Right, which is why we have that negotiation, right? We have to have that handshake to say, well, this is how we can talk to each other, and, you know, we support. But essentially, this is all you have to do. So from a .NET perspective, or from a server-side perspective, I don't need to do anything special with my objects or my strings or anything like that. I just pass it in, right? And then the framework is going to do the serialization for me. Right? Like, the only thing that you're going to see is a change in traffic. Like, your traffic is not going to look the same way, right? Because it's going to be smaller, right? Like, it's going to be less packets going back and forth, because we've chosen a more compact serialization format than JSON, which is a little bit more, again, it's human readable, but it's a little thicker on the wire.
Right. So once you get it down correct with JSON, you could switch over to message pack.
Yeah, you could switch over to message pack or any other protocol we support, and you don't have to change the rest of your code, right? Everything else stays the same.
So my other question was, how easy is it to use the SignalR stuff with a Windows app? Can you use it with a Windows app that talks to the ASP?
Sure. So we have .NET clients, Like, so I've shown you a .NET server. You have a .NET client. Just like we have a JavaScript client and we have a Java client in preview. And it works the same way. Like the exact API that's here, it's the same type. It's, hub connection builder, configure logging with URL build. The casing is a little different because, everybody's case is different, but other than that, it's the same thing. Any more questions?
So if client reconnects are not supported right now, how is it handled? What's the workaround?
You have to do it yourself. So essentially what will happen is when the connection drops, right? So we have a handler for errors. So in your error handler, essentially you just check to see, okay, well the connectivity dropped, and you'll do a retry. Essentially is what you do.
Retry to reconnect?
Retry to reconnect. So you essentially, so like this here, what we're doing here is we're creating a connection, right? So on error, right, when the connection drops, you just have to create the connection again. Hopefully we'll have that fixed or sorted out in like a couple of months or so, but today you have to do it yourself.
You're giving the developer the option to decide what to do, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, so in general, it's not very hard to do. The thing that we saw was, so everybody's use case is a little different. And doing a reconnect, which essentially is a retry, is not something that's like very homogeneous across everybody's use case, right? And so we have to have certain knobs that we could turn to adjust those settings. And so we're gonna have to figure that out. But essentially, if you want to do it yourself, it's really not a lot of code to do it.
Another related question, is this a good case for like a hybrid mobile applications like Ionic, for example, to use SignalR? So if you have a mobile app that constantly can disconnect, for example, would that be a good use case?
Yeah, it is. It is. And we have a company called iRelate. We don't have a company, but there is a company called iRelate. And so they just announced this last week. So this is one of our humanitarian partners that we have. So essentially, it's people that are like they're suffering from mental illness, I guess is the best way to put it. And so it's like a social network for people that can get support and find somebody to talk to and so on and so forth. But essentially, inside of this application is using SignalR Core, ASP.NET SignalR Core, and also service today. And it's using it for its chat, its notifications, its, all of its real-time functionality, like they're using it. Other people are using it, but this one comes to mind because I spoke to them last week.
But you're Ionic, so it's Angular, so whatever works in Angular, and this will work in Angular.
So if you're using Angular already, right? If you're already using Angular, then I'm guessing you already have RX, right? In the box, right? So you should have RX. So if you have RX in the box, RX by itself already has a retry operator in it. So if you saw, like I showed how you could bridge RX and SignalR already. So all you really have to do is make use of that retry operator, and then you just retry to recreate the connection. Anybody else?
You have a question?
Yes.
Sure.
Are we good?
Yep. Yeah. Give me one second. Any other questions? Yeah.
So with Vue, would you recommend using RxJS
Sure.
for streaming and WebSockets, everything? Okay.
Sure. So with Vue, Vue has another plugin, an Vue RX plugin. I didn't use it in here because I'm trying to keep the concept count low. But you could use that plugin, and then you could so you can plug in that plugin and RX and SignalR, and then you can get a really interesting experience. Again, I just didn't use it because I didn't want to put too many things in the demo. Is there anybody else?
Any other questions?
Great. Well, thank you all again so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Guys, we do this every Tuesday, first Tuesday of the month. Thank you for Gravity IT for the pizzas and the drinks. Make sure to finish them off. I don't have to take them home that way. Poor me. And, we got a reminder here. South Florida Code Camp is an event that if you guys don't know about it, you haven't been to it, you should. South Florida Code Camp is over 1,000 people with amazing presenters, including, are you going to present this,
Yeah.
Yeah, he always does. And there's some amazing presenters. Regardless, we've had not only amazing people like Cecil, we haven't had Scott Hanselman, we've done John Papa, we've had other amazing speakers. And the best part, it's free. And so you'll meet other developers, see what's going on, see what's there. It's sfcodecamp.com, right? Hold on a second.
It's March 2nd of next year. And we're looking for speakers and sponsors. We've probably got about 20 speakers so far. Last year we had 78 speakers, 96 sessions. 1,400 people signed up, over 1,000 people showed up. So it's an all-day free event at Nova University. There'll be plenty of JavaScript topics, database stuff, a lot of Microsoft Azure, IoT, AI, BI, all that stuff.
Absolutely, guys. So definitely join them there. To just put another plug, I still do, the mobile app for it, and it's I felt it had to be because the website was ridiculous. Now that he's taking over the website, it works fantastic, and I'm thinking I'm not needing the mobile app because of it and all that. So it's a great event. You should check it out. Check out the website. Check out the website. So it's SF as in South Florida, codecamp.org. .com. Thank you. We should get .org too as well. Guys, I almost forgot. We have a license to give away, and I don't have a laptop. Here we go. All right. So let me go ahead and give that away for you guys. Can you guys, it's a license. You can give a phone as well. Well, I got it. Yes. Oh, I have it here already. Hold on a second. Yeah, I have it here already. Let's see. Nope. Old-fashioned. Yes. Well, you haven't seen one, and that's what everybody uses nowadays. Can you imagine that? Even my has USB-C. Your Apple doesn't have. Nobody has USB-C. There's no. If you guys go to, as in you are going to win something, win.BOCAJS, as in where you are right now, .org, as in we are an organization, you guys will get a ticket on your phone or your laptop. You'll notice there's a trick if you get both. You get 2 tickets. Anyways, go there and so it's win.bocajs.org. And there's only one of you guys. Actually, there is a trick to this. I am actually using SignalR in this. This was created originally for .NET Miami when they were in the. Yeah, you remember that? So I don't know if you guys. Well, I don't look like, but I was actually a professional. In Canada, baseball player. So when I gave it out, I had all these free cards and these free. When I was advocate for BlackBerry, this is how long ago it was. I had free stuff, and I started flinging it out to people. This far away from them, they didn't realize I was an excellent pitcher, and nobody realized that no matter if it's this far away, they were fine. But they were scared of me afterwards, so I stopped using this giveaway. All right, so who has, I forgot I have the way to give away the tickets. 21 of you guys, all right. If there is more, the SignalR server knows about it. You know, I haven't switched it to SignalR Core, only still in the old-fashioned SignalR. Hosted on Azure Cloud. Isn't this exciting? Oh my God, I'm excited. Yes, thank you for the. Oh my. What the? Are you guys seeing something? The same thing as I. Do you have a ticket? What's going on in my system? Okay. All right, hold on a second. Do me the favor of looking down at your phone and notice I am not long polling. I am not doing iframes. I'm doing SignalR. Did somebody get a red ticket? Who got a red ticket? No. Did your number did you click on this? All right. So much suspense, and it didn't work out. Hey, number 20, thank you. Can you look down? Did your number 20 change from number 20 black to number 20 red? No? Did your number 21 change, number 21? Whoa! I meant to make it really loud noise. And the loud noise should be BOCAJS, BOCAJS. Thank you guys. Every single month we do this. This gentleman over here, even though he doesn't need it, because there's all this money, he will be getting a free license to any software from WebStorm to PHP Storm from JetBrains. Guys, we do this every Tuesday of the month. Thank you. See you guys tomorrow. If you have any jobs, they're in the back.